Revelation of the 7 points of Trump's plan for peace in Ukraine, for the peace plan to be implemented in 100 days, and the Russians will reject it immediately, reports say. The 7 points of the proposal in the Trump timetable for ending the war in Ukraine are inferior to the historical circumstances. They do not satisfy Russia, and Russia will reject these plans. The Russians will reject it immediately. U.S. President Donald Trump plans for Ukraine is revealed. These are the proposals that cannot contribute to ending the war in Ukraine. On the contrary, they perpetuate the crisis in the region and include 7 points which in no way will end the Ukrainian crisis, as the plan resembles the Korean model and allows for future resumption of hostilities. In no way does it satisfy Russia's demands for a provision of the required security guarantees, especially the point that provides for the modernization of the Ukrainian armed forces by the Americans themselves, advocates for the total immediate rejection of the plan by the Russians. At the Trump timetable, Trump has drawn up a timetable for ending the war in 100 days. In fact, American and European diplomats are aware of Trump's proposals, according to information from Stravna. However, Ukrainian President Zelensky declares ignorance of the existence of the plan. Some of the plan coincides with what Trump and his special envoy for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, have already stated. According to the planned schedule, Trump intends to have a telephone conversation with Putin in late January, early February. The plan is scheduled to be discussed with Ukrainian authorities early February, and based on results of Washington's communication with Moscow and Kiev, the negotiations can either be suspended if common ground is not found, or continued if such points are found. In the second case, the following further schedule is provided. According to the schedule, Ukrainian President Zelensky must repeal the decree prohibiting negotiation with Putin. And the summits in February and the first 15 days of March 2025 is proposed to hold a meeting between Trump, Zelensky, and Putin, a trilateral meeting or 2 bilateral meetings to be decided separately. The meeting should approve the parameters of the peace plan and then continue work on the agreement at the level of special representatives. From April 20th, 2025, Easter, which this year is celebrated on the same day by all Christian denominations, is proposed to declare a ceasefire along the entire front line. At the same time, all Ukrainian troops should withdraw from the Kursk region. At the end of April 2025, an international peace conference should begin, which will record an agreement between Ukraine and Russia to end the war with the mediation of the United States, China, and some European countries in the global south. At the end of April, the exchange of prisoners on an all-for-all basis will begin. The statement by the International Peace Conference on the end of the war in Ukraine based on agreed parameters scheduled for May 9. After May 9, Victory Day for Russia, Ukraine is asked not to extend martial law and conscription. Presidential elections are held in Ukraine in late August, and parliamentary and local elections in late October. The 7-point points of Trump plan are as follows. 1. Ukraine will not be a member of NATO and will declare neutrality. The decision to ban Ukraine from joining the alliance must be approved by the NATO summit. 2. Ukraine will become a member of the European Union by 2030. The EU, European Union, is committed to the country's post-war reconstruction. 3. Ukraine is not reducing the size of its army. The U.S. is committed to continuing to support the modernization of the Ukrainian armed forces. I'm sure these number 2 and 3 is what Russia does not want, obviously. 4. Ukraine refuses military and diplomatic efforts to return the occupied territories, but it does not officially recognize Russian sovereignty over them. Ukraine refuses military and diplomatic efforts to return the occupied territories, but does not officially recognize Russian sovereignty over them. That's confusing for me. I don't understand what that means. Now, 5, some of the sanctions against Russia will be lifted immediately after the conclusion of the peace agreement. Sanctions will be lifted over the period of 3 years, depending on Russia's compliance with the parameters of the agreement. All restrictions on the import of Russian energy resources into the EU will be lifted, but for a certain period of time it will be subject to special control by the Europeans, the funds from which will be directed to the restoration of Ukraine. 6, parties supporting the Russian language and peaceful coexistence with Russia should be allowed to participate in the election in Ukraine. All actions against these parties and the Russian language should be stopped at the state level. 7, the point about the European peacekeeping force after the end of hostilities is highlighted and particularly problematic. On the one hand, Kiev demands a security guarantee. On the other hand, Russia is categorically against it. Separate consultations will be held between all parties on the issue. Zelensky's office says there is no 100-day plan. The head of the office of Ukrainian President Zelensky, Andrei Yermak, denied the existence of a 100-day plan from Trump. According to him, in fact, such a plan does not exist. There are no 100-day peace plans in reality. It's a disguise for the legitimization of Russian aspirations, Yermak said. And Yermak said the U.S. president has no clear plans, Zelensky said earlier in an interview with the newspaper Il Foglio. He is not warning, he is just saying that he really wants the war to end. We don't know how it will happen yet, we don't know the details, and I think President Trump himself does not know the details, Zelensky said. On January 22nd, Trump threatened to impose new sanctions and tariffs if Moscow does not stop the special operation. Trump called for an immediate end of the conflict in Ukraine, warning of the possible negative consequences of prolonging the fighting. In turn, Putin announced his readiness to talk calmly with Trump on all areas of interest to both countries. Trump has previously said he wants to meet with Putin immediately and is receiving signals that the Russian leader wants to as well. This is from Banking News. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.